Is a signature a gesture of intent? Or is it a surrender of physics? We often view the law as an abstract concept, a collection of words and promises that bind a society together. But the artifact resting heavily on the reinforced plinth before us suggests that in the wider cosmos, legality is not abstract, it is a physical weight. It is a force that can crush a civilization as effectively as a falling moon. This is the Treaty of the Seven Moons, the sole surviving record of the diplomatic contact that ended the Anthropocene of Sector 88. Let us break the seal on the containment unit and document what remains. At first glance, the object appears to be a commemorative stela, perhaps a piece of brutalist art. It is a rectangular slab measuring 1 meter by 60 centimeters, with a depth of 5 centimeters. It is remarkably featureless in its geometry, possessing no ornamentation, no borders, and no seals of wax or ribbon. It is a monolith of pure, light-absorbing gray. However, when we attempt to subject it to standard laser scanning to map the surface, the beam simply terminates. It does not reflect. It does not scatter. The light is swallowed. We are dealing with a material classified as Null-Iron. Spectrographic analysis fails to return a periodic signature because the atomic structure of this slab lacks the valence electrons necessary for chemical interaction. It is chemically inert to a degree that defies terrestrial metallurgy. It cannot rust. It cannot be dissolved by acid. It cannot be melted by anything short of a stellar core. It is a material designed to be immune to the passage of time. This tells us something profound about the intent of the signatories. When humans write contracts, we use paper or digital code, mediums that are fragile, temporary, and easily amended. The entities that drafted this document intended for it to exist longer than the star system it governed. This was not a temporary agreement. It was an immutable physical constant, forged to outlast the bedrock of the planet itself. Reference Plate 1a, the micro-etching. Under electron microscopy, the smooth surface reveals itself to be a landscape of information. The text is not carved into the Null-Iron, it is encoded within the lattice. The molecular bonds of the material have been rearranged to form glyphs. This suggests a fabrication process involving femtoscale manipulation. The text is so dense that a single square centimeter contains more data than the entire legal archives of Earth. The context of the excavation reinforces the grim permanence of this object. We found the treaty in the ruins of the High Spire, the seat of global governance for the target civilization. The city around it had been reduced to glass and ash by a thermal event of unimaginable intensity. The spire itself was sheared in half. Yet, this slab was found sitting on the charred remains of the central podium. Perfectly cool, perfectly pristine. It did not suffer a single scratch during the apocalypse that erased its authors. I find this durability unsettling. It implies that the preservation of the law was prioritized over the preservation of the people. The artifact radiates a sense of cold, bureaucratic inevitability. It sits on the table like a tombstone that was carved before the body was even cold. We must also consider the tactile feedback reported by the recovery team. Those who touched the slab with bare skin, before protocols were established, reported a sensation of absolute stillness. Not coldness, but a cessation of vibration. It is as if the object acts as a localized entropy sink, dampening the atomic motion of anything it touches. It is a physical anchor. In the next phase of analysis, we will attempt to parse the linguistic structure of this anchor. But even before we read a single word, the medium itself has already delivered the verdict. This was not a negotiation between equals. Equals sign on paper, acknowledging that circumstances may change. Masters carve into Null-Iron, ensuring that the terms will endure long after the servants have turned to dust. Moving beyond the metallurgy of the slab, we confront the mechanism of the betrayal, the text itself. To read the Treaty of the Seven Moons is to enter a labyrinth of syntax designed to disorient the moral compass. The civilization of Sector 88 did not fall to a weapon of war, they fell to a clause. Our linguistic team, utilizing a heuristic translation engine trained on galactic trade pigeons, has spent 3 years decoding the fractal script etched into the Null-Iron. What we have found is not a standard diplomatic agreement. It is a masterpiece of predatory linguistics. Reference Plate 2b, the syntax tree. In standard terrestrial languages, A sentence flows linearly from subject to verb to object. There is a clear causality. The language of the treaty, however, utilizes a recursive nested structure. A single statement of intent is buried beneath 40 layers of conditional subclauses, exemptions, and definitions. To the human eye, the preamble reads as a benevolent offer of uplift. The signatories agreed to facilitate the technological ascension of the host species through the mutual exchange of atmospheric assets. But when we unpack the semantic depth of the glyph used for exchange, the meaning shifts. In the dialect of the visiting entity, exchange does not imply a two-way transaction. It implies a metabolic conversion. A more accurate translation would be, the host species agrees to be digested to fuel the ascension. This deceptive vocabulary is pervasive. We see the term alliance used repeatedly. However, the root of the word in their tongue shares its etymology with livestock management. To them, an ally is not a partner. An ally is a resource that has been secured but not yet harvested. The civilization of Sector 88 believed they were signing a defense pact. In reality, they were signing an inventory manifest. The most chilling discovery lies in Article 4, the section governing the 7 moons. For context, the planet in question possessed 7 natural satellites, mineral-rich bodies that stabilized the planet's axial tilt and tides. The treaty frames these moons as collateral. The text stipulates that the visiting powers would provide atmospheric stabilization tech, giant geoengineering towers found in the ruins, in exchange for a lien on the celestial bodies. We found the specific legal term used for this lien, or avex. Roughly translated, it means the foreclosure of the sky. It appears the civilization was suffering from an ecological collapse of their own making. They were desperate. The visitors offered a miracle cure, machines that would scrub the air and restore the climate. The cost seemed negligible, legal title to 7 uninhabited rocks orbiting the world. But the devil is in the definitions. I draw your attention to the fine print in subsection 12 alpha. The treaty defines the moons not merely as the rock and soil of the satellites, but as the gravitational influence exerted by said bodies. They did not just sell the moons, they sold the tides. They sold the stability of their own rotation. They sold the night sky. I find the naivety of the Sector 88 leadership painful to document. They viewed the law as a shield. They assumed that a contract signed in Null-Iron was a guarantee of safety. They failed to realize that in interspecies jurisprudence, a contract is often just a delayed action weapon. The visitors did not invade. They did not fire a shot. They simply waited for the civilization to miss a payment. And miss it they did. The treaty includes a performance clause. The civilization was required to maintain a specific industrial output, a quota of refined exotic matter, to pay the interest on the debt. But the quota was calculated using an algorithm that scaled exponentially. It was mathematically impossible to fulfill. This is the hallmark of civilizational usury. The loan was designed to default. The visitors never wanted the refined ore. They wanted the foreclosure rights. They wanted the legal justification to strip the assets. The psychological impact of this legal entrapment is evident in the later archives of the civilization. We see a shift from celebration to bureaucratic terror. The High Spire became a frantic hive of lawyers and diplomats trying to renegotiate the terms. We found desperate addendums carved into stone tablets, not Null-Iron. Just stone, begging for extensions. They were arguing with a monolith. The Null-Iron slab does not accept amendments. It is a read-only document. The tragedy here is one of scale. The people of Sector 88 thought they were engaging in politics. The entities they treated with were engaging in resource extraction. It is the difference between a man arguing with his neighbor and a man arguing with a strip mining machine. One operates on emotion and logic. The other operates on a preset yield curve. The Treaty of the 7 Moons was not a peace deal. It was a slaughterhouse receipt. Signed by the end of Sector 88 did not arrive with the thunder of orbital bombardment. It arrived with the quiet, bureaucratic precision of a repo operation. The civilization did not fail to fight, they failed to pay. And in the logic of the treaty, insolvency is indistinguishable from extinction. On the date of the default, A date calculated down to the nanosecond by the Null-Iron slab, the atmospheric stabilization towers, that dotted the landscape did not deactivate. They reversed their flow. We now understand the true function of the technology the visitors had provided. These were not air scrubbers designed to clean the biosphere. They were compression engines. They were high-volume pumps designed to package a planetary atmosphere for transport. At the moment the foreclosure clause, the or of X, was triggered, the towers began to harvest the sky. The forensic meteorology of the collapse is terrifying to reconstruct. The global air pressure dropped by 40% in the first hour. This was not a slow leak, it was a violent siphoning. The sky, once a hazy industrial yellow, turned a deep, bruising violet as the atmosphere thinned. The winds generated by this suction reached supersonic speeds, flattening the very cities that had petitioned for the technology. But the most harrowing aspect of the collapse was the 7 moons. The visitors claimed their collateral, massive gravitational tractors, concealed within the orbit of the satellites. Engaged, they did not simply tow the moons away, they used the moon's gravity wells as a rake. They dragged the celestial bodies through the upper atmosphere, skimming the cream off the top of the planet's gas envelope. The civilization looked up to see their beloved moons descending, looming larger and larger until they filled the horizon. It must have looked like an apocalypse. But to the entities enforcing the treaty, it was merely the collection of assets. The biological termination of the species was essentially a side effect of this resource extraction. As the pressure fell below the Armstrong limit, the water in the bodies of the inhabitants began to boil at body temperature. They did not burn, they desiccated. We found the High Chancellors in the spire, still clutching their stone tablets of renegotiation. They are mummified, perfectly preserved by the vacuum that now envelops the planet. Their mouths are open, frozen in the act of shouting an objection that no air existed to carry. The planet today is a barren rock, stripped to the bedrock. There is no weather, there is no sound, there is only the silence of a bad debt finally settled. The atmosphere of Sector 88 is now likely breathing life into a dozen other worlds. Worlds that paid their premiums on time.